Hi guys. This is going to be the much anticipated Captain Marvel video. I'm really hoping I have time to do it because I'm trying to start it before first block on Friday, because time. We made the smart decision to get a really cute puppy, which has taken effectively away the tiny little crumbs of free time I had. Anyway, before we get to Captain Marvel, we have to talk about the worst news I've had in 2020. And let me tell you, 2020's been rough for everyone, but it's also been rough just for me. I've had a long 2020. I lost a gallbladder in emergency situations in 2020. And I am more upset about the announcement that Marvel will not be releasing Black Widow as planned. I don't understand the logic behind pushing Mulan to Disney Plus for streaming, but not Widow. That's a lie. I understand the logic. The logic is parents of young children are willing to spend a lot of money to occupy them, which I get as a parent of a young child, 2 young children. I rented Trolls too. It was a lot of money to rent it. I didn't care. It bought me time. I had it for 48 hours. I get that people were dumping money on Mulan because of the particular age bracket it appealed to. I don't understand why they don't have faith that we, the adult nerds, would not pay a lot of money to see Black Widow. They could probably put a $40 price tag on Black Widow, and I would pay it. I'd probably pay it more than once. Anyway, they are too reliant on the box office take-ins from Black Widow, and I have a weird feeling about the announcement, besides the fact that they said 2020 will be the first year since 2009 without a Marvel release. When they announced the drop order, they kind of did a subtle shift, which it leaves some food for thought. So when they push the movies, Black Widow's still going to be first. I anticipate that they will not be dropping the Disney Pluses prior to that, because as the Falcon and the Winter Soldier video I did covered, pretty sure that Black Widow's going to introduce what will become fairly central villains in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. At least it will spark some of the things that they need. They're going to need Taskmaster. They're going to need Thunderbolt Ross. So I think that Black Widow will come before Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think it'll come before WandaVision. WandaVision is meant to be the direct lead-in to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So I don't think they're going to keep the release dates on those. I think they're going to push everything and maintain the timeline, with the exception of the fact that they said they were pushing the Eternals and Shang-Chi in The Legend of the Ten Rings. But when they announced the push, the order was reversed. Shang-Chi's coming first. I don't know if we're meant to take something away from this, unless it just didn't matter. In the scheme of things, would it really have mattered if, Thor Dark World came out before or after Iron Man 3? I mean, I guess not, right? In their individual timelines and in their individual phases, they did what they needed to do. But in general, there were movies that could have come out, in either order. I suppose maybe Eternals and Shang-Chi are like that. But it is interesting because Marvel doesn't seem to be doing anything accidentally. They certainly have the money, and they certainly have the time. They're willing to wait on Widow. They're willing to wait on her. They're taking the bet that she's going to be big, and they're taking the bet that it's going to pay off. So I don't know that we should ignore the fact that they're willing to smudge their release order. Anyway, Captain Marvel and why Marvel sucks at feminism. You may get the sort of misunderstanding that I was born a Marvel fan. I was not born one, I was made one. If anything, I really preferred DC. When I met my husband, I really didn't know anything about Marvel. And he was a much bigger Marvel fan than he was a DC fan. I mean, we bonded over comics and everything, but the big story of the matter was that Marvel was doing a much better job, generally speaking, with media. Given that Marvel was better with media, what we are now looking at is how they represent gender. Shout out to Steph, who's going to hear half this video, even if she doesn't want to. Sorry, I knew this would happen when I did it before First Block. So, when DC started producing their films, they were widely terrible. DC's yet to put out, with one exception, 2 exceptions, they don't really put out good comic book movies. They have the strongest elements of their own comic series. They have Batman. They have Wonder Woman. They have Aquaman. They have The Flash. They have Superman. And they manage to mess it up. Consistently mess it up. with the exception of Wonder Woman and Aquaman, whose individual movies are amazing. Wonder Woman is probably one of the best examples of like a feminist piece that's been put out recently. And I know several film-based feminists who take issue with that because of the central love plot. So if I had to, in a nutshell, describe what people find as flaws with feminist thinking and where I stand on it, I am what I call a begrudging feminist, and I think the word feminist needs to die. Needs to die a death. It's been beaten and stretched out and forced into weird shapes, and we no longer have the proper associations with it. It needs to go. Fourth wave feminism is going to do things that first and second and third feminism never achieved. That's just the nature of how things go. As time goes on, movements progress. The issue is that many people are still stuck in the idea of like angry protest-based second wave feminism. And that's part of the problem with modern schools. Modern schools don't typically get too far past the 1960s, despite the fact that it's 2020. Most students I know have not touched the 1990s, and they were not alive during the 1990s, and that's a problem. But in the 90s, third wave feminism started pushing out, and third wave feminism was very identity and gender-based. It also started taking into consideration things like modern media and film critique. When we look at the Wonder Woman film, it is directed by a female director. It was not written by a female writer, but it was written by someone with knowledge of the comic industry, someone familiar enough with how to craft this story with this character. Really hate everything. In case you were wondering or worried, I do still hate everything, especially because we now apparently play music between the passing of classes. Really tasteful music. I just had to listen to NSYNC for about 5 minutes, and that wasn't okay. Anyway, I was talking about why Wonder Woman did something right and Captain Marvel kind of didn't. And one thing to kind of preface, to really emphasize how badly Captain Marvel failed as a movie, is to say, DC's movies have all of their strongest, most popular properties. I started saying this in the earlier video, but I was trying to rush through, hoping I could get everything out before kids started showing up for class, and I couldn't. So, again, DC has all of its strongest properties. Now, it's hard for you guys who are fairly young, and, you know, as far as you kind of understand, since Iron Man came out in like 2006 or 7, these movies have basically been here most of your life, most of your sentient life. If you kind of go all the way back to the beginning of this, DC was more soluble than Marvel. It had more money. Its comics were selling really well. They had more sort of brand name superheroes. They started making Batman movies in the late 80s, early 90s, and they were pretty popular, and they made them through the 90s. You had a couple really good Superman runs, too. Christopher Reeve was really like a famous Superman. Marvel had sold, because it was struggling financially, its largest properties. So Marvel's largest properties were the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man. They made a series of pretty good Spider-Man movies, the Tobey Maguire ones. They're not bad. He lacks some of the pep and spunk of like the Tom Holland Spider-Man, but nonetheless, we still have some good times coming. In selling those things, they had no way of realizing that they were going to launch one of the most successful enterprises ever. But they sold them to sort of keep the boat afloat. When I say this to you, it might be hard for you to understand, but like Iron Man was like B-string Marvel content. I mean, Captain America was big at one time, but was no longer popular. They had sort of run through a lot of Captain America arcs. I mean, Civil War had been a big arc. Winter Soldier was a big arc. People who knew comics knew these things and liked them. But it wasn't really like Captain America was seeing this awakening in graphic novel and comic release, especially not weekly comic release. Same thing with Iron Man. No one's running out the door to buy the newest Iron Man book. People are buying Wolverine and X-Force. People are buying Deadpool. People are buying Fantastic Four. People are buying Spider-Man. They're not coming to town for your Iron Man book. So when they announced that the movie project was Iron Man, you can't imagine the incredible weight riding on that doing well, because it's not their most successful property. It was never their most popular character. And now, like, everyone loves Iron Man. You know, when they put the Avengers together, like when they started dropping that it would be S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers, it was a really big deal because nothing like that had ever been done. And frankly, I remember, like in my young dating years with my husband, when he was catching me up with the first wave movies. So I had to watch Incredible Hulk and First Avenger Captain America and Iron Man with him when we were dating. So when those movies came out, a lot of people were like, you know, the Captain America movie's okay. As a standalone Captain America movie, it's okay. Like, people were saying stuff like, oh, I would have taken more Howling Commandos. Like, we could have had more Steve and Bucky. Not realizing that we're going to have, like, 3 movies of Steve and Bucky. Sure, you can always have more Howling Commandos. We could always have more. But, like, Marvel was building this giant universe, missing, essentially, it's Batman. Missing, essentially, it's Superman. Like, missing Fantastic Four and X-Men. Missing Deadpool, missing Spider-Man. And it's hard to do. In fact, in the original Civil War arc, which I could do a whole nother film on, Civil War is based off of a different kind of core idea having to do with mutant registration and enhanced registration. They did it differently with the Accords in the movies, but one of the kind of big things is, like, Tony Stark is a public figure who's unmasked as Iron Man. Steve Rogers, everyone knows, is Captain America, and they divide the teams basically by should people have to register or should they not. And Tony Stark persuades Peter Parker to unmasking and revealing that he's Spider-Man, which inevitably leads to the death of Mary Jane. They obviously didn't do that, although we have a Mary Jane again. Anyway, as they're launching, one of the things Marvel did really well was it conscientiously looked at how to do comics well. If you translate some of these comic arcs and keep some of the centrally good messaging of those comics, and then you figure out how to make them all work together, which is what comics do. Individual comics are doing their own thing, and then you'd get these little, like, spoilers that they kind of knew what the other books were doing, and then they'd have a big crossover event. Marvel was doing that. DC, on the other hand, was sort of just like, take everything we have. We have Batman, look at Batman. We have Superman, look at Superman. Just look at them, they're great, look at them. Just look at them. Look how great they are. They weren't writing well. Then they brought Wonder Woman out. Holy cow. I still occasionally, because I'm now a hormonal mess being the mother of small children, especially a small girl child, I cannot watch Wonder Woman walk over no man's land without, like, getting physically choked up. The reason being, like, they didn't oversell the point to me. It was clear. This is a girl power moment. Like, she's raised in Themyscira. She's, among the Amazons. There are no men there. And she's kind of told, like, you are in charge of your own strength and your own empowerment. You're in charge of your own protection. And there wasn't this heavy-handed message of, like men are useless or men are terrible, which tends to get conflated with second-wave protest feminism. Like the old Gloria Steinem, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. It's really not about man-hating. It should be more about redirecting your energy towards yourself. You don't need a man the way a fish needs a bicycle. And yet, at the time, in the 50s and 60s, you literally needed a man for a lot of things that you shouldn't have needed a man for. The recent passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg kind of bears some weight on this. Some of the big cases that she helped push forward in terms of sexual equality. One of them was something like women don't need a man to co-sign on a mortgage. Women don't need to have sort of their ability to be pregnant and have babies held against them when they're being hired in jobs. Like, this isn't man-hating moments. This is just what should be common sense. If you are a woman who is able to afford her own house, why should a man have to co-sign with you? Et cetera, et cetera. So I liked how they built up the Themyscira because it was more focusing on female empowerment than it was about man-bashing, which man-bashing is not a part of feminism. It should never have been a part of feminism. Some people get angry and do it anyway, but, like, the point is not to light all men on fire. The point is to dismantle the patriarchy. And not because most people are like, yes, patriarchy. The problem is most people don't realize it exists. Not really. They don't really see a lot of the hidden workings that make things unequal. And we have evolved in a time, like 2020 is not the same conditions for women that the 1960s were. They should not be having the same fights. We should be having different fights. The fights evolve. Some of the fights don't fully go away. Why are we still arguing over wages? Really shouldn't be a thing. Why do we not have universal maternal leave? And paternal. Both parents should be allowed to stay home with a small child and get paid for it. This should be a thing. But anyway, why are we still arguing over it? In Wonder Woman, she was just strong and she was just willing and she was going to do, like, she's looking at all these male soldiers who are just bereft of hope and they don't believe that they can do it. And he says nobody crosses that trench. And we know that trench to be called no man's land. But they don't, they don't really say. They don't, like, heap on the, like, extra serving of it and like, rub it in your face. But when she gets up and that's her unveiling of the big, this is her first moment really fully in her Wonder Woman costume. And she gets up and she's in the skirt. Wonder Woman's worn pants once, and the run lasted for about eight books, and it didn't last well. I really would like her to have pants and perhaps more supportive undergarments, but she did look great, and it still really felt like Wonder Woman. And she kicks absolute ass, wearing a tiny skirt, a bustier, and some gold bracelets, running over no man's land and charging. And it's the height of all things you want. She didn't call for backup. She just clears the way. She's just going to handle this. She doesn't need anyone to help. Now, at the same time, you get this distinct impression that Diana is in it with the team, right? She's not doing this to, like, rub their noses in it. They're like, well, we can't move on to help people because we're stuck here. And she's like, I can unstuck you. Let's unstuck you. Boom, let's go forward. Compare this to Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel suffers from some of the worst kinds of, like, attempts to be feminist, which is we have to make sure we have a female writing team, even though the female writing team had no experience at all writing action movies and writing comic movies and had no idea how to do it. They have no experience. They had no business being there. When they're doing it, they had this assumption that people used to do in the 90s when they made bad superhero movies. Like, there's a ton of, like, kind of crap X-Men movies or bad Punisher movies that just rely on the idea that we're here for action sequences, not for exposition. Like, we don't need things explained to us. Just, she's a hero. Assume that she's a hero. She's your hero. One, they changed away how the powers of Captain Marvel come to her. So it's supposed to be, like, essentially an alien creature named Marvel who imbues its powers, and you're very similar to, like, Green Lantern, like the worthy get chosen, and it hops from person to person. What's great about that is you can keep changing who your Captain Marvel is. Captain Marvel's not always a woman. She's sometimes a man. And she's also come into different female bodies. I am damn excited for Kamala Khan. Kamala Khan, 17-year-old Muslim from New Jersey. She is Miss Marvel because she's young and she's not in the military. Though, should we frankly be holding rank against people right now? Anyway, Kamala Khan gets these powers, so it's not always Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers isn't bad. It wasn't a bad choice. Like, the raw materials of looking at Carol Danvers wasn't a bad idea, especially her cat was Chewie in the books. Now he's Goose, whatever. That's kind of an interesting thing. As soon as they said that they were bringing in the cat, I was like, the cat's going to scratch Nick Fury's eye. Of course it is. It's low-hanging fruit. I'm not even upset about that as a plot point. As far as I'm concerned, the cat was the strongest part of the entire movie. The thing that concerns me, especially because I cannot really express how upset I am that I don't get Black Widow right now. I want it in the worst way. I've been waiting a long time. Like everyone, I'm going to be waiting even longer. I really hope that it holds up to the hype of having its release this far suspended. Black Widow is their next real attempt to have a feminist point in Marvel and do it the right way. And from the trailers, it looks like there's hope. I had very limited hope based on the Captain Marvel trailers because they showed almost nothing in terms of backstory. It felt very limited, and it was. So one of the big issues is that they just gave her powers without explaining her worth and her worthiness. Being a woman does not give you instant cred to be a superhero. Being a woman in a male-dominated field does not give you instant cred to be a superhero. We have some great super villains that fit the same qualifiers. In the Jessica Jones Marvel series, I think the lawyer that works with her is an amazing, like, villain, anti-hero, like, complex character who's this woman in a male-dominated field. Absolutely deeply flawed, very villainous, I mean, intensely interesting. And she had light years more exposition than Carol Danvers did. We had a few brief seconds of little clips where Carol was always standing up because I guess she had been pushed down. Great. There was no real exposition as to why she had been kept down, nor no exposition like the only reason that she had been kept down in the Air Force was because she was a woman. We don't even get this from Maria Rambeau when we're talking to her. And what is their friendship based off of? The fact that they're both women? Feminism doesn't mean you have to have a girl power party. It means that it doesn't matter. I'm not saying I disliked the female friendship. There's something called a Bechdel test, which is a basic feminist film marker. Is there more than one female character? Are they named? Do they talk to each other about something that is not a man? I mean, check in the Captain Marvel boxes for that. But it's one of the examples of, like, you forced this to work. Like, as much as I liked Maria Rambeau better than I liked Carol Danvers, I still don't know why they're friends. I don't know why that friendship was so meaningful. I don't know why, at the end of this movie, part of the big thing that Carol Danvers comes back and does is she's like, you, single mother of a beautiful child, why don't you come on a suicide mission with me where it's very likely you will die and orphan this kid? Hey, kid, do you want a jacket? I get that we're, like, setting up, and perhaps the only thing that's really useful from that movie is the setup of Monica Rambeau. Monica Rambeau is going to very likely come into her own in the new Marvel series in the Phase 4 and 5 universe. She's already been hinted in WandaVision, and I imagine that they are just stealing up these characters to do, like, a second wave of Avengers. Probably young Avengers, because they have the Hawkeye show coming in. They've already kind of teased that Clint Barton will train young female proteges because he was training his daughter in Infinity War and Endgame. They already are hinting in the WandaVision series that there could potentially be the twins. I forget the one's name. Essentially, it's like a second version of Quicksilver. His name is Speed. I think that's Tommy, and then you have Billy. And Billy's like a modified version of Scarlet Witch. But you have several characters leading in. So if our only gift from Captain Marvel is Monica Rambeau, I guess we have to say we're fine with it. Monica Rambeau becomes Photon, which is a Captain Marvel-esque character, imbued with extra strength and extra powers and the ability to fly and stuff like that. It would be kind of interesting for that to occur, because the big problem is that they kind of removed the element from Carol Danvers that she was worthy to be imbued with these powers by a being of infinite greater intelligence and power than herself. Like, for Marvel to be like, you have been overlooked and you are generally the most worthy person here. It's sort of like a Hammer moment. When Captain America picks up Mjolnir, you're like, Steve Rogers is worthy. It's a qualifier, right? No one else can pick up the hammer besides Thor and Captain America. Captain America can pick it up. Technically, Vision too. It's a whole nother thing. But, like, the fact that Steve Rogers can move the hammer solidifies him as leader of the gang. Everyone should follow Steve. This was always the right idea. We were always meant to be here because Steve is worthy. We never get a moment that certifies Carol as worthy. She's called emotional and temperamental the whole time. And yes, is that a frequent slight aimed at women, like an empty hit for people to go like, you're awful emotional, honey? Yeah, but, like, she was. It's not necessarily sexist to call somebody a quality that they actually possess. She was emotional. She didn't listen. And not because the laws put in front of her were in some way inherently bad, sexist, or detrimental. She just didn't like them. That doesn't make her a strong feminist standpoint of a character. It just makes her annoying. You're meant to, have some sense that the rules imposed on her were imposed on her to strictly limit her based on the fact only that she was a woman. We didn't even get a single moment in Captain Marvel of Maria Rambeau going, yeah, Carol and I might have scored the top 2 scores on our entrance exams, but they put us in the lowest class and they put, these other guys ahead of us that scored lower than us. They just had little scenes of them going, better, faster, farther. Better, faster, farther. If you don't deserve it, you shouldn't have it. The lack of worthiness of Carol Danvers to have those powers was never explained in the movie, and it is the single greatest disservice to it as a feminist film. If she is worthy, then it is amazing. As it is, she's just Princess Sparkly Fist. She just has the ability to punch through things and fly and go to space and apparently not breathe oxygen anymore, and we're supposed to be okay with it. There is no reason that she survives that accident. I'm not saying that random accidents that make us superheroes don't exist, because the Hulk. But there has always been in comics some mild version of so it was an accident that made Banner Hulk, and yet it seems cosmically to be something of importance. Bruce Banner becomes this great influence in the general galaxy because he becomes Hulk. And Hulk does all these things. So even though it was an accident, it seems like fate has a hand in it. There is absolutely no reason besides randomness that she survives the accident that makes her Captain Marvel, and that is a disservice to the power set. And also, I don't know how they're going to translate it now. So if she just randomly gets these powers, are they just going to randomly leave her and decide to go to Kamala Khan? Because Kamala Khan deserves these powers. America Chavez deserves these characters. This is a good way for Marvel to actually bring in diverse female characters with a purpose, and yet they kind of screwed the pooch, because how are you going to empower them? Literally, how are you going to give them powers? Because you've taken that aspect of Carol Danvers away. I would have desperately loved for, in the process of trying to figure out who Carol Danvers was and what happened to her, for them to have interviewed, her father, and say, the father's just clearly this, boiled down, hard-necked guy who always wanted a boy. Maybe he has a boy. Maybe there's a son in the house and the son's kind of useless, and he's always building up hey there, kiddo, you're so great. Oh yeah, Carol's always a bit of a problem. And always focusing on the wrong parts of his daughter, and obviously not able to accept her worth because she was a woman. You missed easy plot elements to explain Carol Danvers and her worth. Why did we have to have the whole weird switchover of the Kree and Skrull, too? No one really understands why we had to take one of the most established Marvel villains in the Skrull and suddenly try to humanize them. There was no need for it. Really hope they just undo it. And then we accidentally have evil Carol. The only nice thing going forward is that potentially the villain for Captain Marvel 2 is Rogue, so we have another X-Men tie-in. But, they did her better in Infinity War and Endgame, in the couple minutes of screen time she had, than they did in an entire movie dedicated to her backstory. So I am really not interested in any old writing teams getting this girl back. And apparently Brie Larson demanded, basically producing rights and veto rights over the story. And frankly, she's not doing a great job making this into something that it needs to be. So she should really relinquish control to somebody who can steer this boat a little better. I say that because I like a lot of the projects she has chosen, and she has managed in some way to undermine some of their worth. I don't know that she really understands how to play that character. And I don't know that she really understands that it's not enough to just go and posture. You can't posture and do this. You do need explanation. You do need some reasoning. It's not enough to just stand there looking tough. It's in some ways there's scenes where that plays. The scene where Thor tries to intimidate her with the hammer and she knowingly kind of smirks at him is adorable. There's no reason why Captain Marvel should be in any way construed to be more powerful than, like, Scarlet Witch in Endgame. There's no reason Carol Danvers is more powerful than Thanos. I mean, she should be very powerful, but she shouldn't nearly reach that level. The thing in Endgame that shows that we do have writing teams who know how to do these feminist moments, because tonally it worked and it was kind of fun and quirky, in the way that you have to suspend some disbelief, like in Endgame in the final battle sequence, when Peter Parker was trying to keep the gauntlet away from Thanos, you know, he's getting just annihilated and he's just this poor kid from Queens who needs a hand. And Carol Danvers comes and she's cheeky and she's like, hey there, Peter Parker, you got something for me? Because she's going to be the one to sort of take the ball into the end zone, if you will. And then when he's like looking at her and he's like, there's a lot of people in front of you, how are you going to do this? Suddenly emerge all the female characters and go, we'll help. It was a great moment that was totally organic to the comic genre, where you do occasionally have, like, why were they all conveniently so close by that they could come help in this moment? Just suspend disbelief. Why are all the Avengers friends? Why are 3 Infinity Stones in New York if you pick the right year? There's a whole lot of stuff we gotta just decide to believe in. That was a very cool comic forward moment of the girls all coming together. And then you have like Valkyrie on the Pegasus getting the assist from Okoye, having women of all different levels of power, from Scarlet Witch, who's like, you know, mutant and powerful, Captain Marvel imbued with alien strength. It's supposed to be an alien anyway. Don't really know what it is in the movie because they never freaking explain it. Then you have people like Okoye, who is just human and damn determined. Same thing with, you know, in Infinity War we got a similar moment. Obviously in Endgame we didn't, but like with Natasha. Natasha's human. She might be well trained, but she's human. And anytime Natasha gets an opportunity to like show her strength, despite the fact that she's not imbued with enhancements, is an incredibly empowering moment. The fact that she's always playful and smart and spunky and on top of things and never lets it get her down, and even some of these men can't handle it. Like, these are moments that are important for girls to see, as opposed to Captain Marvel just kind of going like, better, faster, farther. What is that meaningless phrase? They wanted so badly for it to become a catchphrase, and because there was nothing that showed she actually was better and went faster and went further than anyone else, because there was nothing to show that she was in some way a leader, it fell flat in its face. And frankly, they need to fix it, preferably by getting rid of this Marvel and just kind of recasting and going in a different direction. Just bring forth Kamala Khan. Bring forth America Chavez. Bring forth any other version of this character, because I don't really feel like we're salvageable from here on out. And the great thing was that the powers could just be like, sorry, Carol, you're good. Thanks for all your service. Have a nice life, and just move on. Like, when you had the actual backstory for it, you could do that. But because now they've done weird things with the backstory, they've written other people into a very weird corner, and I don't know how you write your way out of it. Like, as a writer, how would I solve this problem? I can't make the powers suddenly alien, sentient and alien. They are alien in that an alien created them, but they're not like a sentient life form type character the way they're meant to be. I can't decide that, like, they just exit her now. We'd have to do something where, like, I don't know, she gets sick or she wants to retire, and, like, God willing, Nova comes into the MCU. They're saying Nova over and over again. He needs to come. He would have the power to kind of be like, hey, Carol, thanks for your service, and, like, transfer the life over to someone else. I mean, how else would you do it? Unless we have some sort of lab experiment that goes wrong. Banner, maybe. We do get a She-Hulk, so maybe something just happens and Carol's powers, Venom style, kind of symbiote into somebody else. Please. Anyway, this has been why Captain Marvel is not a feminist piece. I have potentially hours of footage of me just looking at the TV, yelling at it, so if you ever need more, I'm here for you. And, you know, empty plug, there are many other videos. I'm going to keep making them. You guys have a wonderful long weekend. Really hope that you are not as depressed as I am about the absence of all things Marvel from 2020. Bye, kids.